The missiles would do tremendous damage. Particularly, they could strike the big military assembly factories where they're making drones by the thousands. They're turning out these drones. And the drones are Russia's principal weapon for intimidating Ukraine by bombing Kiev and other strategic centers all the time, day in, day out, night out. And that is a real threat. And the Russians have sort of indicated they're frightened of this. They've said, if you do this, this is seen as a provocative, hostile act by the West to us in general. It's Russia's security. And we have all our options open. In other words, threatening this and that. We don't know what. So I think the missiles threat is a real one.
Donald Trump seems to think he's solved all the problems in the Middle East. So now he is turning his attention to Ukraine. He's had a call with the Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday. They talked for 2 hours and he announced the pair would meet in Budapest to see if we can bring this inglorious war to an end. He's meeting Volodymyr Zelensky in the White House later today. And as you can imagine, people are very excited by that, given what's happened in the past. The Ukrainian president is apparently going to ask for American Tomahawk missiles to be made available to his armed forces. Now, Michael, it's so hard to read where President Trump is on this. Whose side is he on? One day he's on Zelensky's side, the next day he's on Putin's side. The missiles are quite a big deal because it does change the framework to be able to strike Moscow in quite a serious way.
They are indeed. And I think possibly that's what's persuaded Putin to say, right, let's meet. The missiles would do tremendous damage. Particularly, they could strike the big military assembly factories where they're making drones by the thousands. They're turning out these drones. And the drones are Russia's principal weapon for intimidating Ukraine by bombing Kiev and other strategic centers all the time, day in, day out, night out. And that is a real threat. And the Russians have sort of indicated they're frightened of this. They've said, if you do this, this is seen as a provocative, hostile act by the West to us in general. It's Russia's security. And we have all our options open. In other words, threatening this and that. We don't know what. So I think the missiles threat is a real one. Whether Trump will actually go ahead and say to Zelensky, right, I'll let the Europeans buy them for you. It's not, I'm going to give them to you. No, he's not giving anything. He'll let the Europeans buy them and give them to Ukraine and say, here you are, now try and defend yourself. But I think a bigger force for him is this idea. He now thinks, I can solve all the world's problems by my personal charisma. And straight after Gaza, he now thinks that he has this magical ability to meet people, great enemies who are not budging, not talking, and just by his own persuasive charm, stop them doing what they're going to do, or might do. I'm not sure that's going to work with Putin, because Putin is a much, wilier person. And we may see what comes of this. Clearly, the Hungarians are sitting pretty because they like Putin and they're Trump's favourite European country. Well, Orban is his favourite European leader because he's very right-wing and very pro-Trump. So goodness knows what might or might not happen there. My feeling is we're not going to get a breakthrough at all.
It's interesting. I mean, we won't get diverted by Gaza, and we're by no means out of the woods in Gaza, but Trump received a lot of praise for effectively holding Benjamin Netanyahu's feet to the fire. But it does feel to me, Alice, that giving Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine is a sort of no going back decision, which I'm not sure Trump is capable of at this moment. And I think I probably agree with Michael. There'll be warm words about the Tomahawks sort of dangled, but no decision.
I mean, I bow to the expertise of the diplomatic editor in this obviously very knotty diplomatic problem. I mean, I do think that Trump clearly does have some kind of ability to get people around a table. At least he does seem to have achieved some at least a first stage of a peace deal in the Middle East, and I think what Trump is good at spotting is where he has leverage and what Putin might want from him. And I think it is trade with America, right? Because Russia is poor, and that's ultimately what does for your leadership in the end, is if your people are impoverished, if your people are struggling. So maybe there is a glimmer of hope here, but I don't know. I don't know what it is that Putin actually wants.
Well, he wants normalisation, as it were. He wants the trade deal. That is indeed a very big incentive, because the economy is actually beginning to go right downhill. I mean, it's held up amazingly well for 2 years, but now is all the figures show that the thing is really getting pretty desperate. Inflation is going up. People are beginning to feel the effects of the war. And I think Putin, to some extent, has to be responsive to what Russians feel. I mean, mostly he doesn't care at all about what his own people feel. But on this thing, I think he does need some kind of break. And he has got some incentive, but he feels at the moment, whatever's going on, he's still winning. And why should he be stopped from getting what he actually wants? And I think he'll play it so that there's a verbal agreement to do this and that and the other, but it won't stop him on the ground.
Absolutely. But Chief Constable Dennis, would you give Tomahawk missiles to the Ukrainians?
Yes.
Oh, there you go. End of.
That will fix them, yeah.
I mean, it is interesting. I mean, I always think, Biden refused to allow Ukraine to use the weapons he gave against Russia on Russian territory. But it does strike me that Russia is a paper tiger. I mean, we've had this submarine limping through the English Channel the other day. I mean, the Russian military is woeful. The only advantage they have, Michael, is bodies.
Yes,
They can throw
yes.
tens of thousands of men.
Yes.
They can fight a First World War.
Well, they have
style.
drones, which are beginning to be effective.
Drones, artillery, and bodies.
Yes. I mean, the thing is that you could have said exactly the same in 1941. You could have said, well, the Red Army has been decimated by Stalin, all its generals have been shot, it's really very weak, it's undisciplined, they've got very few weapons, and yet they kept on and kept on and kept on, and in the end they prevailed. Not just because they had many more people, and they did sacrifice, 22 million bodies, but the fact is that in the end they got it right. And you sort of think that the Russians are doggedly persistent, and the military may begin to work out tactics that are successful, and all along the front line on the eastern part of Ukraine, where the Russians are dug in, they do seem to be steadily pushing along.
He just put out a truth statement. If you haven't seen it yet, I encourage you to look at it. But I was just talking with the president and the Secretary of State and the Vice President, and it was a very good and productive call. It lasted more than 2 hours. There were various issues that were discussed. President Putin congratulated President Trump for solving the conflict in Israel and Gaza and bringing peace back to the Middle East. He also thanked the First Lady for her efforts to bring back children and save children in this brutal conflict. And the president feels like great progress was made on this call. They also agreed to have a high-level senior staff meeting convened as early as next week, which will then be followed by a meeting very likely between President Trump and President Putin as well. They talked about Budapest as being a location for that. So as you all know, President Zelensky is coming to the White House tomorrow, so these discussions will continue. I think he thinks it's possible, and he would, of course, love to see that happen. But right now, there were discussions and plans are now being made for the Russian side and our folks, led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, to meet, and then for President Putin and President Trump to perhaps meet again. But I don't think the president has closed the door on that at all. I don't want to get into that, but as I just said, the president and President Putin discussed meeting together in Budapest, and President Trump will talk about that opportunity with President Zelensky when he's here at the White House tomorrow.